Hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy episode number 126. This is the show where we interview AWS guests, talk about the latest in AWS news announcements. We rate them and review them to see how they impact you and your operations. My name is Stephen Barr.
Hi, I'm Rahul Subramaniam, and we have an amazing show as we prep for reInvent. So we've got so much stuff happening. Can't wait to share all of that with you.
Yeah, it is 24 days away, if you could believe that.
Time's running so fast. I'm just about getting set. I have a lot of travel coming up. I'm going to be in Dubai for 2 weeks before hitting reInvent. So I am getting ready to get going very, very soon.
Fantastic. Well, can't wait. It's always good to see each other in person and to see our
Absolutely.
other tech friends in person as well. So if you're going to reInvent, looking forward to seeing you and meeting up. Might be 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, but we will see you.
100% true. And like we've said before, reInvent is all about making connections with all the amazing people in this amazing community. So, yeah, just reach out to us. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to talk to you and see what you've been up to. And if possible, try and do as many shows as we can while we are there, talking to different people, bringing all the amazing guests on this show. So, tell us what you want to hear about. We will, of course, be doing an early morning show, trying to bring all the previous day's events and happenings to you as diligently as we can. Again, bandwidth is always a concern when you're at reInvent, but we'll do our best.
So figure it out. Worst case, I can send someone running with an SD card to somewhere away from the conference center. So we'll get the information to you one way or the other. Well,
Absolutely.
let's have a look at reInvent. So this episode, we want to make it the ultimate reInvent guide from the perspective of generative AI. So there are 12 topic areas. Let me put this on the screen. If you go to the areas of focus on the reInvent page, we see AI, ML, analytics, architecture, business applications, cloud ops, databases, developer, generative AI, industries, security, compliance, and identity, startups, and storage. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got a prediction for how this year's reInvent is going to go, and I've used Claude to visualize this prediction. It's going to be reInvent. There it is. Everything is going to be related to generative AI in one way or another. Raul, do you
I
agree?
I think I agree 100% with it. I think that AI is front and center in everyone's mind. Everyone's planning to do something with AI. The large language models, and particularly generative AI, the large language models have gotten to a point where they are now starting to make real impact on real work across the board. And I think generative AI is going to be front and center in all of this. For example, what does cloud operations mean with generative AI? And we've actually had we have got a very, very neat experiment that we've been running internally, where if you wanted to know anything happening across any product, any system, understanding what happened as a trail, you could literally ask the system and it would tell you exactly what's going on across all of your AWS accounts. It's amazing what you can do for cloud operations to get to the root cause of something that's going wrong anywhere across hundreds of accounts that you possibly own.
So, do you have
Um,
agents that are looking at CloudWatch and agents that are calling APIs and looking at the log data?
Yeah, so everything is actually done with live queries. So we've got tools that are available to the generative AI chat conversation. And those tools have access to all the AWS accounts. They have access to all the CloudTrail stuff. They have access to all the logs that they can pull up. And then the chat basically allows you to analyze all of that data and then figure out what the root cause of something going wrong looks like.
Wow, that's really neat. How you can, yeah, have CloudWatch, and of course on the cloud operations side, there's using Q to make SAM templates, just
Yeah.
to make Terraform. All of those different things are so much easier, especially those things that you don't do all the time. I think probably Raul, you and I both know SAM well enough, but we're not
Yeah.
making new cloud formation stacks every day.
Yeah, I mean, most
So
often we end up actually copying and pasting an existing template and then modifying it to suit our needs. we don't build any of this stuff from scratch, or we haven't done it in a while. And now we don't even do that. We just say, I want a SAM template. We tell generative AI chatbot to say, I want a SAM template that does ABC, and it just generates one for you right out of the gate.
Exactly. If you said, okay, I wanted a scheduled Lambda to run once a minute. Oh, I knew I had a project where I had some event bridge event that fired off, and then you go looking through all your SAM templates, and so I end up doing a find for every SAM template on my in my dev directory, and then try to remember which one it was. But those days are gone. You just ask Claude or ask Q, how do I do a SAM template that makes a Lambda function that runs once a minute, and it'll
Yeah,
do it for you.
exactly. And
And what
actually,
about
this morning
generative?
I was trying to build an app from scratch, and I used, I don't know if you were familiar with Replit and Replit agents. I just used a Replit agent to create the entire app from scratch and got it deployed in a matter of 10 minutes. It was absolutely amazing.
Well, how do you think generative AI is going to affect? Let's see, looking at my graph here, how do you think generative AI is going to affect databases?
Oh, databases are really amazing because a lot of applications, when you have to decide what is the best way to make a SQL query to query the databases, generative AI does an amazing job of taking your use case, automatically turning it into a SQL query and executing it for you if and where you require it. And it does a pretty awesome job of being as efficient as it possibly could be in this scenario. Generative AI can also look at your DDLs and your schemas to decide what a better optimal solution looks like given a set of use cases or a certain set of access logs that you can provide it. So there's tons of stuff happening with databases and generative AI even today. So I expect that that's going to be the focus of how do you squeeze out another 20%, 30% from your database with nothing more than just using a generative AI agent that just does it more that optimizes it for you, or and in runtime, make sure that your execution is as optimal as it can be.
Yeah, okay, so there's two different things there. There's the one that's the optimizing existing operations. So maybe that is joining in a different order or eliminating expensive operations. And then there's
Yeah.
also just new queries that you wouldn't have thought of that you can say in English. And it'll, because sometimes you know that it's possible, but it has that 7 layer join that you really don't want to power through. But AI will happily do it for you for a fraction of a cent.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd be surprised how many times I still come across the problem of developers, especially folks who haven't gone through the formal database training or a formal education databases. They don't realize the difference between a left join and a right join, and the kind of performance impact it has given the particular data profile that you have in your database. And they just put something join something, and they don't know what the default is. They don't know if it's actually doing a left join or a right join, and it just messes up your queries, and they don't know what's happening. And you just ask the AI, and it says, "Hey, this is what's wrong with your query and why the performance sucks, given all this data that you already have in
And similarly, moving the database into the application, right? If you were just
there."
doing select star from this table, select star from that table, and then in your code
Right.
you've got some hash map that's merging the two, you think it's a much better way to do that
Yeah.
in the
Exactly.
database instead of in using a Python dictionary. Let's look at AI and hmm, security compliance.
Oh, I think this has already been around for a bit, where we've kind of already established that rule-based security and rule-based compliance just can't cater to the insane number of new vectors that are coming up for attack on infrastructure, on systems, and so on. So unless you have AI that's constantly looking at existing patterns and looking at anomalies and stuff like that, you can't really do this. So yeah, I totally believe that generative AI is going to be um, front and center in security and compliance. But there's another area which actually is very interesting. There are a lot of systems, security systems that are old. They are reliable. They've been running rules-based systems for a while. Another way that I've seen some folks use generative AI is to generate these rules dynamically, looking at all the data and deciding what the new rule set should look like and keep up with all the rules that need to be in place to secure a system. And that's another very interesting way of using generative AI, where the system is still old, but generative AI closes the gap on keeping up with all the changes that need to be made to the system.
Well, even thinking through IAM, right? It's easy when you're developing to just have very open permissions, but what you really
Yeah,
want to do is have the least privilege model. But that
correct.
requires enumerating exactly what you do need. And we're humans, we're lazy. It's easier to say star than to list out, well, do I need
Correct.
I need read, but I don't need write, and then think about that. But generative AI, again, that's happy to do the
Correct.
grunt work of figuring out, okay, what is the minimum set of permissions that this needs to work?
Exactly. I think that's an important point you just brought up, which is generative AI is not lazy, while humans are, and therefore it doesn't mind going and creating 1,000 rules that are absolutely granular and, with pinpoint precision, gives you exactly the permission set that you need, and it's the minimal permission set you need to get the job done. And that's not something that we as humans, I think, are really good at doing at scale.
Well, and that brought up an interesting point that that Ethan Mollick put up on LinkedIn. I want to show this. I thought it was really neat. Well, Raul, to your point about how AI is not lazy, I really thought this LinkedIn post by Ethan Mollick, the professor at Wharton School, author of Co-Intelligence, what he brought up, we are not used to abundant intelligence, which leads
Yeah,
people to miss a huge value of AI. Don't ask for an idea,
yeah,
ask for 30. Don't ask for a suggestion, ask for 20. Right?
correct.
Same thing with AI. We think, okay, we don't want to do this task because it's slow and tedious and boring, but it does require some judgment. Doesn't
Yeah,
mean AI is going to complain. We don't have to anthropomorphize it and think it's lazy or bored.
exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. That's where the real value lies. So I think there are a lot of folks who get stuck you know, on the fact that AI might not always be accurate, but neither are humans. So, but given the fact that AI can generate 100 ideas and you can pick the best ones from those, makes a huge difference in the way you can leverage AI, and it's a different mindset. It's just not something that we've been used to in the past. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. All right, well, let's look at the reInvent. What I wanted to do is look at reInvent from the lens of you're interested in generative AI. That's why you want to go.
Mm.
What does that look like? So, looking at the generative AI topic track, they say, okay, let's see, AWS makes it easy to build and scale generative AI that's customized for your data, for your use cases, for your customers. So let's look at the different offerings that are there, just kind of talk through them. There are learning sessions. So there's talking
Yep,
about sessions that are offered in different formats. So we talked about that last week. There's chalk talks, there's keynotes, there's code talks, all of these different ones. And they give an example
correct.
here. So here's one: choose the optimal compute environment for AI ML workloads. So this is an interesting one. And this one comes into more of our domain of how do you do something more efficiently in terms
Yeah,
of cost. So what
correct.
do you think? This is interesting. Looking at this one, it's Graviton. Do you use Bedrock? Do you use SageMaker? There's a chalk talk there. I think this will be an interesting one to see how they're dealing with workload, budget. How do you weigh these different options that you have?
Yeah. So as we dive into this, you'll see that there are two big buckets of solutions that you'll see being advocated everywhere. I mean, this is what we see across the board, across companies today. Bucket number one is where there are companies and developers who are spending a lot of time and effort trying to figure out how to get their applications to be very, very accurate, getting their applications to perform like your regular traditional applications do. And they are spending an inordinate amount of time. I wouldn't say inordinate. They're spending an appropriate amount of time to make sure that the models understand the domain, make sure that the models are fine tuned to all the data that exists, and so on. Um, the downside to that one is that when a new model arrives, they kind of have to throw away all their old work because all the fine tuning, all the refinements that they did on the old model, they can't leverage that, when a new model arrives and if it has significantly better capabilities. There's a second school of developers who operate on the principle that the current AI does what it does, but we always expect that in another 6 months there's going to be another model that's going to be way better than the existing model, and we'll be able to do more. And therefore, they don't operate that much in the details of the model, but they operate at a layer above, or a shim layer above the LLM itself. And they bet on the fact that there's going to be a better model coming down the line. And they create some very interesting new use cases as they go to market. So anytime there's a new model, they get very excited about it because they can leverage it right away. Now, in AWS, you'll see both of these camps, and there's tons of work being done on both of them. For example, if you're talking about the ones who are betting on new models coming out and being better, you've got a whole ecosystem of services around Bedrock, which is great because you can literally swap out, you know, your Bedrock, say an older model with a newer model. Everything remains the same. If you happen to use the AWS layer to make sure that all the models are, you're talking to the models in the same way, that's great. That makes it even simpler for you to swap out models, right?
You use the Converse API, and
The
you just
Converse
switch the
API can do
model
that.
ID, and
Correct.
all of your tools work. All of your
Exactly.
parameters are the same. You're in the same format.
Correct.
It's
And then
oh,
there's
it's
the other camp where there's a
yeah.
lot of work being done with SageMaker and refining models and fine tuning models and making sure that the existing models can start delivering value today at this almost at the same scale as the traditional workloads were doing. And personally, I'm in the former camp where I believe that the newer models are going to get more capable, and you want to be riding that wave. But again, everyone has their opinions, everyone uh, has their context under which they are building the solutions. Like some of the insurance companies have so much data of their own about what makes their business work well. It might make sense for them to fine tune their models for all of that data and make sure that they've got a model that works really well for them. Others who don't have so much data might fall in the other camp. So I think this would be a great uh, place for you to come in, listen to all these conversations happening, and figure out what generative AI means for you. Which camp or which kind of direction do you want to take your products, your business in, and what are the bets that you're going to make for the next year, 2 years? And it's never been harder to make those bets because things are changing so rapidly. Like earlier, you could make a 5 year bet quite confidently because you could see where the technology horizon was. Right now, with AI, with generative AI particularly, things are changing every quarter. And so it becomes even more important that you really understand all the choices, understand what the options are, and then figure out what bets you want to make for the next year, next 2 years.
I'm definitely in the same camp. Although it does, here I want to put a GIF on the screen. Let's see if this. I'll put it in better quality in the app. But this is it does feel like this sometimes. Where you just
Correct.
you're just one track away, and you just have to keep putting the like this is the classic Wallace and Gromit. So this
Yeah,
is it does feel like this sometimes, but that's okay. It's part of the fun of it.
correct.
It's yeah, it is what it is. Actually, just today I was helping. I was trying to grade my son's math homework. He had done a math worksheet. And then I thought, you know what? Let me just try taking a picture of it and giving it to Chat GPT.
Hmm.
And it worked. It worked fine.
Yeah,
I said, just give me all the correct answers to this homework, and it wasn't complicated work, but it
yeah,
was a lot of multiplication problems. And just a few months ago, that would have been an issue.
yep.
We were talking about how LLMs can't do math, but that it's not an issue anymore. At least not at that level.
Couldn't agree more. Uh, yeah, so it's transforming a lot of different domains, and you want to attend the sessions that will help you gather that context for you to make your decisions about what bets you want to make for the next few months, for the next year or so.
Well, looking at the sessions, so if you go to the session catalog and you're looking at the generative AI keyword, there are 1,213 sessions for you to choose from. So I think that our visualization earlier was accurate. Everyone is adding the generative AI, some
Correct.
flavor of generative AI to their talk. So obviously, you're not going to go to 1,200 sessions. I think if you really, really were good at running and good at planning, you could probably get 20 across.
I would say 4 sessions a day is about the max that I've seen accomplished.
Yes, it's just a 20.
Yeah. So yeah, about 15 to 20 is what would be kind of at the top end of what is feasible.
All right, so how would you pick if you had these 1,213 sessions and you wanted to narrow it down to 15 to 20 that you're going to go to? Because we want to follow our own advice, leave some time for networking, leave some time for impromptu discussions that might change your schedule. How do we narrow down this list?
Okay, so I take a completely different approach, and it might not be the same for anyone else. For me, at reInvent, I usually start looking at the people that I want to meet, the people that I want to engage with. I then look up all the sessions that they're going to be and figure out at what time they're going to be at whichever location. And then I plan my schedule accordingly so that I can meet up with all those folks, maybe at the end of their session or maybe at the beginning of the session if I land up there a little early and have those conversations with them. So it starts off with, there are some questions, some domains, some services that I'm particularly interested in. I'll go find who the product managers and who the team members are who are making a lot of the important decisions there. I will then go find them across the sessions and then figure out where I need to be to meet with them.
So, for example, if you wanted to do some FinOps related work, some Kerr queries, I would
Yeah,
type in Steph Gooch. There we go.
exactly.
Wow, 19 sessions. But I don't think that's all. Look at this. This is not a great match. This is Steph Lone,
Correct.
Stephanie Zhao. Interesting. This is not. Let's see if we can do.
I think you should look for
There we
Stephanie
go.
Gooch.
No.
Okay.
She has tried to eliminate Stephanie Gooch. Okay, so if you do it in quote Steph Gooch 1 session, COP 403, much more reasonable.
Great.
So go to that one, and you say, "Oh, okay, this is at the Win,
Yep.
Thursday, December 5th, 12 p.m. This is going to be an interesting discussion. There's going to be great discussion afterwards. I'll probably block out 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. to hang around. Maybe I'm going to get lunch with somebody afterwards."
Exactly. So that's how I plan my sessions, or plan how I'm going to attend the sessions. At the end of the day, all of these are going to be online, so I can always catch up on the content later. But I will not get another opportunity to meet with these people while we are there in person in Vegas.
Yeah. I was just looking at the numbers here. So there's 2,528 total. And then so if you filter for generative AI.
That's half the sessions.
Yes. Well, if you do lowercase AI, like we had before.
Or you might even say Gen AI.
Gen AI. No, not.
No.
It is generative. Let's say the word generative. 1,000 sessions, exactly.
Yeah, I think there are about 1,200 sessions in total. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's tons and tons of, like, it's going to dominate the sessions over there, and there's so much to learn.
Definitely. This will be, and look, just scrolling through here, making great products, generative AI for executives. So boot camp. That's what there's securing your generative AI applications, document processing. Wow. Okay. And there's some of these are repeat sessions. Repeat sessions are interesting because clearly the market of ideas has spoken and they're seeing, okay, the need for these repeat sessions. So those are always neat to pay attention to. Okay. Well, that is the reInvent generative AI perspective. I think there's more than enough to choose from. It's going to be really information dense. So look at the session catalog, plan your time, and then compare that with the map to make sure it's technically feasible. All right, let's take a quick break. And we come back, we're going to cover a few AWS announcements. We'll be right back.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry, because CloudFix uses AWS recommended savings techniques. It fixes, not just finds. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part of all, it works non-stop. Stop overspending on AWS and click on the link to start saving now.
Okay, we are back. We just wrapped up the AWS reInvent generative AI perspective. So there's a lot to see, but we're also seeing the flood of announcements before reInvent. And here's one of them. Amazon Bedrock prompt management is now generally available. This is neat. So what this means is you can basically have a prompt that has a name and a version number, and then mention those when you're dealing with Converse or Invoke model.
Right.
Bro, as you've seen big AI products being developed, what issues do you see with prompt management, and how would this help solve it?
Yeah. So I think generally, prompt generation, prompt creation, prompt management is done in isolation with developers, and we don't see that much sharing across projects, across teams, or whatever. There are certain patterns that you learn about what works, what doesn't work with models, and that doesn't get shared enough because the prompts are not shared in a centralized repository or in a central place where you can refer to them, modify them, edit them, and manage them for all the executions. However, if you centralize that, there's tons of ways in which different products can leverage all of this data. And I think that's what this solves. So if you're running a whole lot of different experiments, you can basically have versioned prompts that you can run against them. You can run evaluations against those to figure out which ones are performing best. You can parallelize a lot of the work that you're doing to work with these prompts to create new apps, new use cases, and get it into the customer's hands very quickly, because you can run through all the steps that are needed in the middle to make sure that what you're delivering is of value.
Well, I really like it's not just the prompt, but it's also the configuration. So
Yeah,
um,
your
top
temperature,
your
your all of
temperature,
those other
top
aspects
K,
of, yeah,
and your tools. I didn't even realize this, but it says tool configuration in
yeah,
addition to the model choice. So that way you really have this functional like stack of stuff. I mean, tool configuration is it's a bit tricky to get right. There's a bunch of things that go into it and out of it. And like you
yeah,
said, it's if you're doing that in isolation, then everyone has to reinvent their own wheel in a slightly different way.
correct, exactly. And with tools, like sometimes you have to change a parameter or do something like that, which as you're just figuring out how best the LLM operates with it, you're going to keep changing that configuration as well. So having it all in one place makes life really simple, makes it more shareable. And yeah, I think overall it accelerates the rate at which you can get apps out in the hands of customers.
All right. Well, how do you rate this announcement? So, for those of you new to the show, we rate each AWS announcement that we review on a scale of one cloud to five, five being the best. And we also give it a tag of either simplifies or adds complexity, or sometimes it's neutral. So, that's our scale. Raul, how do you rate this announcement?
Without a doubt, this simplifies the life of developers because you now can just reuse shared models and, oh, sorry, shared prompts and configurations. So it definitely simplifies, and I would give this a 4 cloud.
All right. Well, that's a simplifies and a four. And just for reference, one project that I thought, if you aren't using Bedrock prompt management, there's a neat project called Fabric.
Yeah,
And Fabric is by Daniel Miesler. And they have these things called patterns, which are this is a collaborative project, but patterns are ways to accomplish things. And so they have things like analyze a patent, analyze a presentation.
yeah,
They have ones for let's see, explain code. And each one of these has a user and a system prompt. And even if you're not using Fabric, it's still neat to look through this. Just an example of how to
yeah,
use LLMs in general to give it an identity, what to output, not to output. There's a lot of great things in here. Let's see. Oh, extract article wisdom. So if you hand it an article, this will tell you, um, how do you
what are
get the
the
most out of
insights
an
in it?
LLM?
Yeah,
So it has this is really neat. It shows you how much effort you have to put into a prompt in order to
correct.
make it useful. And then with combine that with Bedrock prompt management, where you can have they can be versioned and you can be very disciplined about them without having to, have a submodule of prompts.
Exactly.
All right, let's go on to the next one. This is an OpenSearch one.
Hmm.
OpenSearch service launches next-gen UI for enhanced data exploration and collaboration. I think this is another one of our examples of where AI is going to push into everything. Now, what are the impact of this one, OpenSearch next-gen UI?
Yeah, so OpenSearch has a pretty amazing next-gen UI, which has traditionally always been trying to compete with Kibana, and now you've got a new version, which is hopefully going to compete with Kibana and be at the same level of amazing visualizations and so on being available to you. Yes, I do expect to see some version of Q show up in that exploration of OpenSearch as well. So you'll see some version of generative AI being right there. But I think this is really interesting for OpenSearch to become even more relevant and as ubiquitous as Elasticsearch and Kibana had become. So that combination of Elasticsearch and Kibana is what I think AWS is trying to kind of make sure that that gap is as minimal as possible.
All right, well, here's a question. So we used to have the ELK stack, right? The
Yes.
Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. And so
Yeah.
now is this what would this be?
EC.
Well, no, because it's O. So it's O, the
Oh, yeah.
OpenSearch.
Correct.
Are we
Then
OpenSearch,
CloudWatch. You still
CloudWatch,
got CloudWatch.
OpenSearch, CloudWatch, Next Gen, the OCN stack?
But I'm sure AWS will come up with a more ridiculous name for it. That is going to cause problems in the long run. But yeah, I think for now we'll call it the OCN stack.
Okay, well, if they can do systems manager, change manager, I'm sure they can figure out something good for this one. All
Or
right, well,
call a service evidently. that couldn't cause that couldn't cause any problems when you're writing a blog post.
there's no more injecting skepticism inducing word into a service name. I think we should say the OCN stack. That sounds pretty good. The OpenSearch, CloudWatch, next generation UI stack. How do you rate this one?
I think this is a 4, and I don't know if it particularly simplifies, but it's definitely a good thing to have. I have to play around with it a little bit more to figure out whether it simplifies the life for developers. But if they get, the closer they get to Kibana and all the stuff that Kibana was doing brilliantly, I think that's a win.
I might argue that it might be a 3.5 just because I'm looking for either a screenshot or a link to where there would be a screenshot.
Yeah, I think I
And
would agree with you. Just showing that and exciting customers to go try it out would have been really awesome. I don't know why they didn't just put one in there.
because if it's a next gen UI, now I know in the what's new announcements there's not images, but there should have been a link to somewhere. They have the
Yeah,
OpenSearch developer guide. Okay, so that's a link to somewhere. Is there a screenshot in here? No.
a whole
Okay.
lot of code. That's not UI.
Yeah, so they have to have within one click getting you to a screenshot. If they're gonna, especially
Yeah,
if they're going to be talking about a UI.
I agree. Maybe I'm going to drop it down to a 3 because that's if you're putting up a post to excite your customers about trying this out, the least you can do is put up an image, particularly for a
Yes.
UI.
Okay, so 3 on the announcement, but the
Hmm.
actual content
Yeah, the
is
content is great,
problematic. Yeah,
and yeah,
the actual
yeah,
subject matter. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so then is this a simplifies?
I think I'd give this a neutral for right now. We'd have
Okay.
to just see what additional value the new UI has. Again, I haven't tried this out, but I'm going to try it out to figure out whether it truly moves the needle. Generally, aesthetically, it's much better.
Let's have a look at this good OCN stack and see how good it does. All right, next one. I'm very excited about this one. In fact, I'm going to try this out after the show. Claude 3.5 Haiku model now available in Amazon Bedrock. It's a
Yeah,
3.5 Haiku. This is as good as Opus, 100th the price.
correct.
This is exciting.
Yeah, it just goes to show how quickly all the models have been changing and how much better and faster and cheaper they've been getting with every iteration. So this is absolutely amazing. We already stopped using Opus a while back and defaulting to 3.5 Sonnet. Then about 3 weeks ago, 3.5 Sonnet new got announced, or the new version of 3.5 Sonnet got announced, which is significantly better. And now you have the 3.5 Haiku, which I think if you were using any of the cloud models from 6 months ago, this new model should do just as well, if not better, than any of your models, any of your expensive models from 6 months ago.
Well, I'm looking forward to swapping this into my SBCT, the Stephen Barr Centaur tool, my social media post and organization manager. I think that 3.5 Haiku should handle a lot of the high level tool orchestration, and
Yeah.
then I can leave Sonnet to some of the creative tasks within that.
Yep.
But overall, this is going to be a lot faster. Because one of my gripes about the SBCT was that it was slow.
Hmm.
Especially for things that weren't that complicated. I think Sonnet was too much. It was
Yeah.
really just sequencing a couple tools, and I think I'm going to try it later today or maybe this weekend. I think that 3.5 Haiku is going to be just enough for doing that, and a lot cheaper and a bit faster.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. So I've already started using 3.5 Haiku in a couple of places, and I actually don't see any difference. Like I swapped out 3.5 Sonnet, the older version, with 3.5 Haiku. It's all faster. Quality wise, I don't see any difference.
Awesome. Oh, this is interesting. I didn't know about this. Cross region inference. So it's in US West 2 and in the US East North Virginia via cross region inference. So does that mean the actual computers are in US West 2,
Yeah,
but they're allowing you to use, let's call this
inference from another region.
giant piece of fiber running across the country between those two?
They already have that. They already have the backbone in place across all of their data centers and regions and so on.
Yeah.
But they have all this replication going on anyway. So just given how scarce all the GPU computers right now, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. This is neat. Lots of good links. How do we rate this one? I think we're a bit biased, but how do we rate this one?
I think I love it. I don't. I mean, it simplifies because it gets way cheaper
Yeah.
than any service that is. It's way faster. So easy choice. So simplifies, and I'd give this a 4.
All right. What would it have had to do to get to a 5?
Oh, having the comparative charts would have been
All
really
right.
neat right here. So if you look at the Anthropic page where they
Let's have a
compare
look
and
there.
they showcase how the models compare with each other, I would have loved to see that over here.
Okay. So here's the Anthropic 3.5 IQ page. Let's have a
Yeah,
look here. This is their announcement. This is amazing. $1 per million tokens of input and $5 per million tokens of output.
yeah. I mean, this they literally put it at the top as to what the value prop is. Simple tables like this that tell you how the how the model performs against all of these different benchmarks. I think the size of this blog post is maybe slightly larger than what AWS has been doing, but it is data dense.
This is great. All right. Well, let's say 4. I'd vote 4.5. Let's say 4.5 simplifies
Yeah,
for the Claude 3.5 Haiku. All right, we've got. All right, I wanted to show some really cool LinkedIn posts that I saw. This is about diagrams to code. And so what he did, he said he drew a diagram in VS Code that contains an S3 bucket with an event bridge notification, starting a step function workflow that when I upload a new file in the bucket, and then asking Q generate infrastructure with CDK v2.
Mhm.
And then he said it didn't work. So he asked Q, generate infrastructure with CDK v2. Be aware that you have step functions workflow with Lambda orchestration in the diagram. And he said it worked. And he's got a link to this. That is such a neat thing. You can actually just draw a diagram, tell
yeah,
Q about it, and then have it actually make the infrastructure. And it's coming.
correct.
We're getting very close to that whiteboard to infrastructure, almost seamless. I
Yes.
thought this was a cool
No,
post.
as we get better and better with visual analysis with the LLMs, I think you're going to see use cases that being unlocked that we had never even dreamt about. It's going to get so exciting with all the, like, you should be able to run a camera somewhere all the time and have an AI react to whatever it analyzes on the fly. So the more we reduce the latency and the better accuracy we get on the image understanding, image recognition, and sequential frame analysis, I think the use cases are going to just explode exponentially. So
Guest
nail.
of the show, former guest of the show, Nathan Peck. This was interesting. He wrote one of these about the pitfalls of LLM powered code generation. And he had a really neat description of how Q developer wrote some code, but then he was able to recognize why it was inefficient in
Hmm.
terms of loop usage, and then he was able to fix it. So I think this is really neat. I think we see this a lot where you still at this point need expert knowledge to really get the most out of it in terms of directing the AIs towards what you want it to do and spotting mistakes like this. What do you think, Raul?
Yeah, I think I'd rephrase that as expert supervision.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Having expert supervision is still kind of essential, but think of it as it gives experts in a particular field almost infinite bandwidth to do stuff. So as long as you can be the conductor of an orchestra, if when you can do that, you basically scale yourself 10x, 100x quite easily.
Yeah.
But you can't not be an expert, because someone who's not an expert in the field cannot become a conductor of an orchestra, right? It just doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't have someone who doesn't understand music well enough, who's not trained in music, who doesn't understand how to conduct an orchestra, to stand in front of an entire orchestra and guide them to do stuff the right way. It doesn't work. You have to be an expert to be able to leverage all the generative AI stuff that's out there. And when you do that, you can scale yourself 10 to 100x.
Yeah. This is really, really cool. And yeah, so definitely follow Nathan Peck. I'll put links to his episodes. We had him on very early in the show. I think it was episode 9, and then we had him back just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he had switched from CDK advocate to generative AI advocate. So we really appreciate him being on the show. All right, I think we have one more article we wanted to look at. I saw this on LinkedIn by AWS serverless hero Ran Eisenberg talking about chaos engineering. So chaos
Yeah.
engineering for Lambda. This is fault injection service now supports injecting chaos into Lambda functions.
Hmm.
Okay. Have you been using fault injection service? And if so, what's been your experience with it?
I haven't built a production system very recently. So, since I've been mostly working on research, not quite as much. But yes, in the past, I have used the fault injection service, and it's really neat. It's the equivalent of the Chaos Monkey tool that Netflix open sourced. It's the idea is that as you build your application, you should be able to randomly shut stuff off and figure out whether your application can uh, successfully or gracefully recover from those scenarios and keep the service live, at least to an expected behavior. Now, uh, generally, it's been you pick a set of services, you create randomized chaos within them, which is randomly go and shut off machines or lambda functions or change configurations or whatever else, and see what happens to your applications. Um, I am on the fence on this one, whether using uh, lambdas is a way to go. Sometimes I feel like you can look at the code that's written and possibly get an LLM to tell you where are all the different places where you are likely to have faults in your code. Like, what are the faults that your code is likely to cause? And that might be an easier or a better way to identify failure points than trying to do this on a live system. fault injection in a live system is an expensive process, right? You have to stand up the entire system and keep hitting it with all these chaos events to make sure that your system can stay alive. I prefer a slightly more preemptive. Like, I'm not saying don't do this. Yes, when you're finally in production, go ahead and do this. But in general, I wouldn't use this as my testing mechanism. I'd do preemptive prevention of these failure points and then do a final validation of that using this approach. At least that's my
Yeah,
personal preference.
this is interesting. I hadn't used this either. The one that I think is really would have caught some of my errors is invocation add delay.
Yeah.
I've had Lambda functions in front of slower API endpoints. I thought,
Mhm.
why is this Lambda function failing? And it's because I have that default timeout,
Yeah.
and it'll trying to debug. Why does it get to this line sometimes and this line sometimes, and
Yeah.
not being able to figure out? And it's just timing out at that point.
Correct. Or sometimes what happens is that when you have an API gateway behind a Lambda function, the Lambda function returns all the right, logs, everything is working just fine. But API gateways, endpoints or REST endpoints are going to time out in 30 seconds. And you don't have a choice there. That's the limit. So I think a lot of these things you can have LLMs analyze critically and tell you where the failure points are likely to be.
Well, there is a lot here, and I'm sure for the people who really want to use this, this will be helpful. I have not used fault injection service myself. I think it's a neat idea. Yeah, I haven't used this myself.
Now, I think
But
chaos engineering definitely has a place. Once you're going into production, you're trying to make sure that your operational configuration is capable of recovering. I would not use this as the first approach to kind of identify these issues.
yeah, that would be very expensive and
Yes,
slow because you're looking at P99 kind of things. But
correct.
you're paying for all 100.
Exactly.
All right. How do we rate this one?
Um, I think it simplifies because if you can just write Lambda functions that introduce chaos, it's way easier than standing up EC2 instances or making all kinds of other configurations. So definitely easier. I would give this 4 because the content is actually quite good in here.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot.
it simplifies the lives of people who are already using this as a full-fledged system. They can make their services a lot more efficient and simpler by just having lambdas be executed.
All right. Well, one more that I wanted to share for today, and this is Nathan's post reminded me of an incredible hallucination that I got when I was writing using Cursor. So I was writing a blog post, uh, and I'm writing in Markdown using Cursor, which is an AI integrated IDE based on VS Code. And it said, so I wrote this sentence. This is the bold one. If you're receiving this newsletter, AWS Cloud Financial Management Track is going to be of interest to you. And then this was my suggested tab completion. And it invented an entire narrative. We're going to be hosting a session. It invented a date. It invented a room, the Flamingo F101. It invented an AWS employee, Karthik Ramaswamy. And it invented a LinkedIn profile URL. Now, I looked this person up. There is a person like this. As far as I can tell, they are in Singapore and don't have much to do with AWS or cloud computing. But it invented a title, the global head of cloud financial management at AWS. Sounds great. And we're going to be discussing budgets, Cost Explorer, and other tools. And I could have just hit tab, and we're obligated now to host this event with our friend Karthik. So, yeah,
So, like I said, expert supervision is absolutely necessary as you
I think
use these LLMs.
I think the temperature might have been a bit high.
Sounds
I want to go to this event at the
really
Flamingo
exciting.
F101. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not to be. Uh, yeah, so this is a great example of how something can hallucinate. It even gave us a sign up URL,
Yeah,
reinvent.awsevents.com/cloud financial management. It all looks very, very plausible. So,
yeah, it does.
yes, supervision required. I'm glad we didn't send this out in our newsletter. Speaking of our newsletter, comment below newsletter, and we'll make sure you're signed up to CloudFix newsletter. All right. Well, stay tuned for other reInvent sessions. We're going to be covering not just generative AI, but also some of the other perspectives, database, analytics, AI, ML. So stay tuned for those episodes the upcoming days as we prepare for reInvent 2024.
Absolutely. And just as a reminder, please feel free to reach out to us. We are going to be at reInvent. We are looking for an opportunity to meet up with all of you, have these conversations. We really look forward to it. Stephen and I we operate this session from literally across the world. He's in Seattle, I am in India, and we do this session every week. We are ourselves looking forward to meeting up with each other again. So yeah, please drop us a note, drop us a comment. We'd love to catch up with you. Let's schedule some time to catch up. We look forward to meeting everyone there at reInvent.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Goodbye.
Bye.